It's time to party with Marty. What's going on, Marty Dytrych?
Jeremy,
Did I?
thank you for having me on.
My
Living
pleasure.
in
Did I?
Houston, the hot Houston. Not so hot today, though.
Well, that's good. Did I say your last name correctly? I feel like it's the last name that people must screw up.
People screwed up a lot. Dytrych.
Dytrych.
So I think what happened, my family, when they came over, usually they change it from Y's to the IE and failed to do so.
Right.
So now they screwed
They
up
just.
every other generation and spelling and how do you spell it, how do you pronounce it, every single time.
Where did your family come from and come into the U.S.?
So the Dytrych side, I think, is Czechoslovakia.
Okay.
And then the other side is Ireland, and then Spain. Believe it or not.
I don't see the Spanish as much for those watching this podcast, Marty.
No,
Marty.
no. My brother's like 6'3", dark skin, tan. I got the red hair and the freckles. So it is what it is.
And you hate him every day for it because you're not 6'3".
No, I'm 5'10". If
Uh,
hopefully 5'10", right? Getting
at least,
shorter with age.
seriously. Well, at least you're honest about that. I've said forever that I'm 6 feet tall. And I may have been 6 feet tall at one point, but my 13-year-old daughter just straight up kept calling me out. You're not 6 feet tall. You're not. So they measured me recently. I'm 5'11 and a quarter.
And it goes downhill from here. So
I know. It killed me. I'm like, I swear there was a point where I was 6 feet. And she's like, no, you're propping it up on your hair. That's not right. You're not. I'm like, yeah, but with shoes on, I look like I'm 6'1". And I think it's funny too, Marty, like during COVID, especially because we're just on like all these calls, right? Online. You don't meet people in person. You start to like develop an idea of how tall or short you
yeah,
think somebody is. And I was always shocked when I then meet somebody in person and I always say the wrong thing. I'm like, dude, you're so much shorter than I thought you were. And they're like, that's not nice. Like, don't say that. Or, wow,
we had
people have said
that.
that to me. They're like, you're taller than I thought. I'm like, I guess that's good.
Yeah,
I don't know.
we had that. One of our investors is in Kansas, and so he invested in us, and we never met in person ever. And then we flew him down to meet some other investors and to get to know the industry. And he pops out of the hotel. He's like 6'8". I'm like, whoa, that
You had no idea.
is not what I thought. So
Well, of course, you have investors out of Kansas, the technology investment hotbed of the state of Kansas, right?
yeah,
That's so
that's
random,
right. Yeah,
but
I
it's
think there's
cool
a
at the
lot of
same
people
time.
that invest in these technologies in the middle of the country. So
Interesting. Well, we'll get into all of that. What one more comment about names, and then I kind of want to get into your background. So obviously, my last name's Funk, right? And people are like, "Man, that's like a really uncommon last name." It's actually a very common last name because what happened is wherever the Funk side of the family came over from in Poland, they get on a boat, they go to Ellis Island in New York. It was Funk something. I should probably do research and figure out what it was, but say it was like Funkovsky, Funkenstein, Funkowitz. And whatever they did, they explained it to the person that was right there. They're like, nope, we're just going to make it Funk. That's just much easier for you now. So many people say to me, they're like, oh, are you related to a Tim Funk in Oklahoma? I'm like, no. I get asked this all the time. They're like, it's such a random last name. You must get this. I'm like, it's actually not because their family
that's
probably also came
interesting.
over, got chopped. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I never would have thought that. That's
Just
really interesting.
yeah, I think it means spark in Polish or something like that. I don't know. That's what my dad told me, so I believe it. Never fact check that. Just kind of believe your dad when he tells you stuff, right? So, 4 minutes in, usually I get to this a little bit sooner, but Marty, a question that I asked to everybody. It's the first question I sent you in the prep. Like, who are you, man? Who's Marty Dytrych?
That's a great question. That's a question that I'm in constant pursuit of answering. So just a simple guy trying to do simple things, maybe in a big way.
AI is simple now.
It's becoming more simple. It's becoming more simple to uh, implement now that we've got kind of our hands around it. I think it'll be easier and easier over time for a lot more people. That's for sure.
You know, I have a lot of interest in talking to you about this because you are in the AI world, and everybody seems to want to ask me questions about that. What happens when you are in tech, in any way, shape, or form, and you've probably dealt with this a little bit. What used to happen is people are like, "Oh, you're in tech. I have a problem with my computer. Can you help
Right.
me fix it?" I'm like, dude, I'm in sales. Like, I don't know the first thing about technology. I can't even log into my email half the time. Like, what are you asking me that question for? But now it's shifted to, oh, you work in tech. Like, talk to me about AI. How are you using AI? I'm like, okay, whoa, things have really shifted and changed with this one. So I want to lead up the story to how you got into AI. Like, where did you grow up? Where'd you go to school? What was your upbringing? And then what kind of led you to industrial data labs and like leaning pretty hard into AI?
That may take up the whole 45 minutes. So grew up in South Florida, West Palm Beach. Family, both my parents owned their own businesses. So my dad owned an accounting firm, and my mom owned a bookkeeping company. And big Notre Dame family. So grandparents went to Notre Dame. So my grandfather and his brother, my dad and his brother went to Notre Dame. And so the only school for my brother and I to go to was Notre Dame. So kind of did the whole Rudy journey through Notre Dame. So applied out of high school, didn't get in. Went to Holy Cross, so the school that Rudy went to, I went there for a
Wow.
year, did not get in again, and then I did the whole. You could apply after your first year at a college. So I went to Holy Cross College. Then you could apply every semester after that, and you only got 3 shots, right? So you can only transfer in your last opportunity is after your sophomore class, right? So after my freshman year at Holy Cross, rejection letter, and then I decided it would be wise for me to make good friends with the admissions counselors. So I would
Nice.
go over there and meet with them and go, what do I need to do to improve? And we formed a really, really good relationship. So when it came time to apply during my sophomore year, I walked over my application, handed it to them in person,
Nice.
and then for us, which was a really big family moment, was instead of them sending the letter, they actually called us and left a voicemail, and we talked to them on the phone. So it was kind of a struggle to get there, but finally succeeded.
So you got into know Marty, Marty,
Yeah,
Marty.
exactly.
I had to. So did you spend 2 years? You already had a couple years of school under your belt. So did you just spend 2 years at Notre Dame?
I was there for 2.5 years.
Okay. Did you go to all the football games? Was that like a must
Of
for you?
course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
So
it's
all the football games, away games we went to, it was
wow.
fun.
Wow, that's beautiful. I also find it a little bit weird too. Somebody that grows up in West Palm Beach, Florida, and then you're spending all of these formative years in Indiana because that's
Yeah.
what you felt like you had to do. But I do get it. I get the pull of Notre Dame. I mean, they're still on NBC like every weekend, so it's easy to make an opinion on them, right? You either sort of love them or you hate them. I'm fairly neutral on them. Probably lean more to thinking just in general, college football is better when the powerhouse programs are good.
Right.
So yeah, we kind of saw that with Michigan last year, right? That they were really good, and I think it was good for college football. You don't want the same teams, Alabama and schools like that, just dominating every year. You need some of the other powerhouses to be good. So it's been a bit of a struggle. Probably they've come close. They're also not like really in a conference for football, so they sort of just do whatever they want,
Right.
which is quirky.
Independent school.
Yeah,
Well, just the school is so globally renowned. how could you really limit yourself to a conference? You know?
Oh, wow. Okay, there you go. Um, I actually went to a Notre Dame game back when they had Brady Quinn and Jeff Samardzija,
Yeah,
if you recall those days.
yeah, I
Um,
do.
they played out here at Air Force, and one of my good friends was just one of those like dyed in the wool Notre Dame fans. His dad went there, but he wasn't smart enough to get in, type of thing, and
Yeah,
didn't have the persistence like you did to be able to eventually get in. So he just went to Colorado, but he loved Notre Dame. He's like, hey, they're playing at Air Force. You want to come down with me to the Springs? And I said, yeah, for sure. And it was fun to watch. Like I think that 60% of the crowd was Notre Dame fans, and Notre Dame won, and it was just kind of cool to see like the vibe around it. And of course, Colorado Springs Air Force Academy is just beautiful down there. But that's kind of my tie into it. It is a bucket list thing to get to South Bend, see a game out there. Like maybe someday. I don't get to Indiana much, so it could be a
that
bit
would
of a
be the
stretch.
only reason to go to Indiana.
Yeah, but it's like a really hard school to get into, right? Like your experience is not totally uncommon. The acceptance rate is super low, and then it's hard once you get there, right?
Yeah, it's getting tougher and tougher. So it's kind of like when my dad applied versus when I applied. My dad was like, "There's no way I could ever get in," and then you know I'll eventually say the same thing to my kids. I mean, it's near impossible right now.
Yeah, yeah, we'll see that on with my kids too. Like my wife went to Duke, which
Ah,
is
yeah.
awesome. That campus is beautiful, um, and my daughters are now talking about how they want to go to Duke. I'm like, cool. It's going to be like 100 grand a year, and it has like a 3.5% acceptance rate. So good luck with that. But maybe the legacy thing will help. I wouldn't mind if they went there. I wouldn't mind going to Cameron, and love the camaraderie of
No,
college and
Duke is
college sports.
beautiful. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
beautiful school, top
Oh,
school for everything. So
yeah,
I
it's
don't think you can
absolutely
beat Duke.
gorgeous. No, no. Well, NC State did last weekend, so that that happened. So you graduate from Notre Dame, right? You're a young pup. You're probably what, 22, 23 years old at that point. Then what?
So I moved back home to Florida for about 2 months. Said I don't really want to live in Florida. Florida's more of a South Florida. The dominant businesses are finance, insurance, legal, so the lawyer profession, and that's not something I wanted to get into. So one night, I kind of just decided to move to Chicago.
Yeah,
Literally packed up my car and started driving. So went from school to Florida to Chicago, maybe 90 days, convinced a buddy of mine to move from Pennsylvania and to be a roommate in Chicago,
awesome.
and then try to figure things out from there.
That's amazing. Well, Chicago was Chicago the airport that you flew in and out of for Notre Dame.
Yeah.
So you had a little bit of
And then
comfort
South Bend
around
has
it.
an airport.
Oh, okay, okay,
Well, we used to go for our family used to go to Notre Dame game every year, and the process is you go to Chicago, stay in a couple nights at Chicago, drive in for the game. It's only an hour and a half away, and then go to the game and drive back. And then my whole family's from
cool.
Chicago on my dad's side, so Chicago is a great place just for our family. And then it's a Notre Dame city, right? So you graduate Notre Dame, and then your next step, most people do, is move to Chicago.
Absolutely. I love Chicago.
Yeah, it's a great city.
Great city. I'm a New England guy. Grew up in New Hampshire, went to college in Boston, diehard Red Sox fan. So I've developed a tradition with a bunch of my college buddies from home, where we pick a different city to go to for Red Sox road games every year. We've
Oh,
done
that is
this like,
awesome.
yeah, thanks. Kind of coming out of COVID, I was like, I gotta see my boys more. You know what I mean? Like this,
Yeah.
I haven't seen my people in years, and we're all mid 40s now. So I'd never been to Wrigley, and the first place that we picked was Chicago, and this was like around the 4th of July in 22, and dude, the weather was just perfect. It was like mid 70s and people were out like on the beach. You develop a real appreciation for like uh, the water being right there too. You don't really think about Chicago as a city with beaches and water, but it is. You got like the buildings right here, and then you have a road, and then you've got a beach, right? And there's like concerts going on out there. Weather was great. I absolutely loved it and want to get back for sure. So Chicago to me, when the weather's good, is the second best city in the country, in my opinion. Want to know
What's
what
number
number one?
one?
San Francisco. And I know that you're a huge California tech fan.
I'm
Some of
curious,
the
what's your
country
favorite stadium
for any sport or baseball.
for baseball?
I mean, Fenway. I've been to Fenway like 100 times. I took batting practice there a couple times.
Wow.
Yeah, that was a bucket list item that I checked at about
Yeah,
35
that's
years old.
amazing. I would
It
love
was
to do that.
it was so cool. It was a perfect bluebird day. I'll send you a text of the video later. I hit a ball to the warning track that in left field, like it just to step into the
Yeah.
box and see the monster right there. And I had my family come down and they give you kind of like free run of the stadium. I think they've locked it down more. They let us in the Red Sox clubhouse. They let us go on top of the Green Monster, like take
Wow.
pictures from the dugout and stuff. It was really like a VIP experience. Super cool that I had to that I had that experience. So I'd say Fenway number one, but it's tough because like as I get older, I become a little bit more spoiled. I want more amenities. Fenway's a bit of a dump. It's just got a lot of like magic and history to it. So like the Oracle Park in San Francisco from like a newer park perspective is way up there. I also really like Coors Field in Denver for a park that's only 30 minutes away. It's like 30 something years old and every time you go into it it still feels like it just opened that day. Like they've just meticulously maintained it, and with the right seats you can see the skyline, you can see the mountains. The weather out here is awesome,
Oh,
right?
you
You
have
got
the mountains out there. Yeah, that's true. That would be
yeah,
awesome.
no humidity. Tomorrow's opening day. I go to opening day every year. It's like the one day a year that Denver feels like a baseball town. So I would say like for nostalgia, Fenway, for comfort, San Francisco, but Coors Field is up on the list too, and and love baseball. So you've done like the warm weather thing, you've done the cold weather thing. I think you're doing the warm weather thing again. So take me back to like early 20s in Chicago. You needed to get a job. Like what did you do?
Yeah, so I decided at that time I wanted to get into real estate and be a builder, but not a builder of homes per se, but more commercial buildings. So what I did was I worked the late night shift at Kinko's. So I would work from 10 till 6 or 7 in the morning at Kinko's and then studied
Wow.
for my real estate license in order to um, become a commercial real estate agent slash broker.
Mm.
And so for the next couple of years in Chicago, I just spent kind of hammering away at the real estate game and tried to figure that out. And then got into the residential side. So
Real estate.
interesting.
Yeah.
It was I was there at the interesting time. So I found my way to working with a private but very big home builder in Chicago, and they had probably a lot of those master plan communities. They
Yeah.
would build all over Chicago, and this was 2005, 2006, 2007, around there. And I would manage part of what I did every Monday would be manage all the contracts that came in from the weekend, right? So I'd
Okay.
look through them and kind of make sure, kind of audit them. And so over the course of time doing that, I saw, okay, these large down payment checks, 10,000, 20,000, tied to the contract with, 3% loan or whatever it was. And then all of a sudden there's a shift and it went no
Yeah.
down payment, no income, everyone's getting a loan. And I'm like, what is going on? So one week you'd get ten homes sold that were coming on Monday. Then all of a sudden it was like 40. And I was like, what is going on? And I could never put things, if I ever put things together, I would have made a bunch of money, but I couldn't put together what was actually
You were
happening.
young.
But
Yeah.
it was wild.
That was
It
a
was crazy.
so you kind of saw the impetus of the housing crash and the
Yeah.
bank bailouts and all of that firsthand. And then that must have shifted things for you, I would think, just from a real estate perspective. Like, what did that do for you and for your career? 2008, 2009.
So what happened? My brother at that time was he played football at West Point, and he graduated in 2005. And once he graduated, he spent I think another year at West Point helping out their
Yeah.
football team in athletics, and then he went to Iraq around 2006 or seven. And
Mm.
so what at that time I was like, what am I doing? I'm doing real estate stuff, and my brother's over, in war. I'm like, well, I'm not going to go to war, that's for sure. So I'm not brave enough to do that. But let me figure out something I can do here. And so I kind of joined, I wouldn't call it political activism, kind of community, but I joined an organization to promote, some set of values on college campuses.
Mm.
And I was out in California doing that. So I would do it at San Diego State,
Cool.
University of San Diego, and all those colleges there. And I did that for probably 3 months, and then ended up moving to DC after I did that. So I drove from Chicago to DC to do the training, DC all the way out to California, so San Diego. And then once I was finished up there, drove all the way back to DC, and then tried to figure out a way to get into politics
Hmm.
slash kind of the media industry at that time.
So very very transient and very like broad interests, I would say. This is fun. Um, so you have no issue moving, I guess it sounds like. Do you
No,
feel like now and we'll get to like the next steps, but you're in Houston now, right?
yes.
Do you feel like Houston's going to be home for a while, or is like you're going to pack up and move to somewhere else?
My wife wants to move to Nashville.
Nice.
So that may be an opportunity. I think with what we're doing with the company, Houston's going to be it for a long time
Yeah.
just because our customers are here, the industry's here, we've got a network here. We've got good friends here. The community that our family belongs to, we're getting closer with. So it'll be hard to move out of Houston, but I have zero problem tomorrow if it's like, hey, let's go somewhere. I'm like, let's go. Why not, right?
I guess I don't know. Like my former podcast partner Tim Lozer, rest in peace. I'm not sure if you knew the whole story, but this used to be called Tripping Over the Barrel. It was myself and Tim, who's just an awesome guy. Passed away from cancer about 2 years ago. He and I had very differing views on this. So I grew up in New Hampshire. I lived there for 18 years. Went to college in Boston. Lived there for a year after, so 5 years, and then moved to Colorado. I've been here for 20 years. So I'm very much like once I get to a place, like I'm there. And I think my wife and I agreed, even when we were dating, like if we're gonna have a future together, like we're here. Like we're not gonna move around for careers. We're gonna figure it out here. We're gonna stay here. And even with all of our family in the Northeast, she's from Pennsylvania. I'm from northern New England. It's like, hey, if they want to, spend more time with us, they can come out here and move to us. Like, we're not moving back there. Whereas Tim grew up like as an Air Force brat and never viewed like anywhere as being permanent, right? He'd be like in
Yeah, I
Germany
can see
for 6 months, and then all of a sudden they're in San Antonio for a little bit, and then they're living in Arkansas, right? And he ended up in Houston, but he never had this sense of like permanence toward Houston. So I always find it fascinating. Like I think people's upbringings a little bit impact that, but I think it does get harder. Do you have kids?
I have a little 4-year-old.
Yeah. So once your kids gets into school, like so they're about 2 years, 2, 3 years away. It's really tough, right? To pull
I can
them
see
away
that.
from their friends.
Friends, yeah, and kind of a familiar setting. I can see that. kind of
That
harm or stunt the development, right?
just like it's hard enough to make friends when you're a little kid, right? And then you start developing close relationships and then you leave. Like there are people who moved that I was friends with when I was 9, 10, 11 years old that I haven't had any contact with since, that I'm like, man, I'd like to see what Brian DeStefano's up to. You know what I mean? We were friends for 2 years. I don't know. I can't find him anywhere, but I don't even know what we talk about. We were friends playing kickball at recess. Like, how have things been for the last 34 years for you, Brian? You know, thank you for inviting me to your 10th birthday party. That was fun. Um, but anyways, so you're a Houston guy now. So, but there's still a couple gaps we have to fill in there. So your real estate, your politics, right? You're a Notre Dame grad. You've got some skills. You're willing to kind of go anywhere. So what happens after the politics experience in DC?
I found my way working for trying to kind of break into media and media sales. And I was like, that could be interesting
Huh.
um, environment to be in because one, you got kind of the politics aspect to it, and then two, you're kind of involved in what's going on in the world. Um, so it's, I found my way to do none of those things. So I started working for. I started working for a company called Clear Channel Outdoor, so outdoor advertising.
Okay.
Yeah, so I sold billboards, and my market
Hmm.
was DC, Virginia, and Maryland.
The
And a
DMV.
lot amount of the billboards were in Baltimore. But then I would go to these parties once a week, and it was called the Churchill Society. And essentially, these parties were federal judges, congressmen, lobbyists. And the deal was you bought a box of cigars, right, to this guy's house who lived right off Capitol Hill. You bought a box of cigars, two bottles of wine, and
Yeah.
then a steak. And so you had to cook your own steak. And then you could switch wine and you do a cigar exchange.
Cool.
And you had like 20 or 30 people sitting in this guy's house around a large dinner table. And just they would bring in authors to come in and speak and talk about their book. So it was like a Tucker Carlson would go in there when he wasn't as popular
Yeah.
and he had kind of some new ideas and go and talk. So I was the only guy selling outdoor advertising where everyone else is. I was like,
You're like,
why am I here? How did I get here? Why do
I
you
love
let me
that.
in?
I love that.
No. But DC was fun. DC is a really fun town. When you're young and single, DC is a place to be.
I think so. I also think it depends what you're doing, right? I actually lived in DC for a summer, Bethesda, so not quite DC, and felt a little bit like on the outside because everybody was like, there are lobbyists and politicians' kids. It was very
Yeah,
transient. There were a lot of lawyers or paralegals. And I was like very early career. I was like struggling to kind of find a job. It's part of why I was only there for like 2.5 months. But it felt like if you weren't in like one of those scenes, if you're in one of those scenes, it's amazing. If you don't quite find your scene, you just feel like an outsider the whole time. So I
I can
agree
see
with
that.
you in part. My experience wasn't that, but if had I found like the right type of work or got in or was a paralegal or something like that, it probably would have been awesome,
Yeah,
as a young person.
I got lucky with the group of friends I was around, and then we play. At that time, kickball was really big
Yeah.
for like 26-year-olds. So we'd play kickball right on the mall or right by the Washington Monument, which
So
was
cool.
amazing.
Yeah.
And then you'd have parties at the bars right across the street from the Capitol building. And so that kind of life it was a lot of fun. Work hard. I guess the essence of working really, really hard and then playing really hard as well. But it's
Yeah.
a fun town if you can grind and
It
then you're
feels,
really good at climbing the social ladder.
yeah, which I've never been good at, but I think that just feels so American, right? The way that you described that, it's like pride, you know. Um, a lot of people were playing kickball out here too. at around that same time. And then all of a sudden, there was just this rash of people like tearing their ACLs playing kickball. I feel like it slowed down a little bit too. So I was always sort of afraid to play because I'm like, I don't want to get hurt. But
It's
I
kind of
mean,
weird, right? When you're like 26 playing kickball, like competitively, where you care. It was fun, weird but fun.
yeah, for me, it was slow pitch softball that I played really up until even last year, on and off. But my big thing that stunted that was when I was about 33, and I was traveling a lot for work at this point. So it was almost like, I we had double headers every Wednesday night. So I would leave on Monday morning first thing, do like a few days worth of meetings, eat like really salty, buttery food, drink a bunch, hustle to the airport Wednesday afternoon, fly home, and then just get to the game right on time. Um, and as you can imagine, I'm like super dehydrated. My body was really tight. And when I was
Yeah.
33 one night, I tore my Achilles going after a fly ball, and that really kind of set things back. I'm like, okay, I think I need to like shift my priorities. I can't be. I got two young kids. I got a wife. I got a job where I travel a lot. I can't be like tearing my Achilles playing beer drinking softball on Wednesdays. So it took a few
No.
years off and then came back, but it wasn't uncommon. And I'd see other people have that injury, and you know what I mean. And I'd just be like, I'm sorry, man. It's like, no, I think I'll be okay. I'm like, no, you're not. You're not okay. You need to go to a doctor and probably get that thing
Yeah.
reattached, my man. I'm sorry. So let's fast forward a little bit, right? So when did you get to Houston, and when did you decide to like make this shift to being entrepreneurial? If you want to fill in some of those gaps too.
Yeah, so I made a bunch of money selling outdoor advertising
Hmm.
fairly fast, and then decided I wanted to get in the music industry to develop a music app for live music. So
Okay.
how I kind of traveled that road, but I still had this kind of media idea in my mind about how people could consume media differently. And at that time, like Hulu was coming out,
Mm.
so there was different plays for platforms in terms of media consumption, right? I think Netflix was kind of becoming popular at that time, and I started to get into music and my travel to work every day at Clear Channel. So Clear Channel is based in Maryland. I think it was Landover, Maryland, or something like that. And I lived in Northern Virginia, so
Yeah.
right across from DC. So I'd travel in, and I got like really hooked on Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys. So I would
Okay.
listen to all like Pet Sounds. I would listen to that entire album to work and then going work to home every day for a year.
That's cool.
And so I just started researching the music industry, and I was like, okay, how are people making money? What's going on with this kind of change in digital um, consumption? How are sales going to change? And what I noticed was there's this big shift from small independent bands trying to make it big via radio or trying to sell some sort of CDs. Remember we bought CDs for like $20?
Of course.
All of a sudden these bands would go from doing a lot of recording and trying to sell music and playing live maybe a couple times a year
Yeah.
to playing live 3 4 times a week. And so you saw this live music scene just hot through the roof.
Mm.
And I was like, what's going on? So I looked at the marketplace. There's a couple apps out there, one called like Songkick, um, that could help these bands kind of navigate where to play, if they're doing a tour. And they started to do national tours. We're a small little band, which is nuts. So I was like, man, this would be interesting to do. Quit Clear Channel, never been to Texas in my entire life,
Hmm.
got an apartment in Austin, and then drove to Austin, and then tried to figure it out from there.
Cool. So
Yeah.
you, so you built an app.
What's that?
So you built an app.
Yeah, we were building an app called Dig the Gig. So it's going to be a Yelp for bands, live performances, and you can tip the band over the phone.
Cool.
Um, So that's kind of how I got introduced to more of the tech startup world, and then learned a ton. Obviously, you've never heard of Dig the Gig, so you can imagine how it went, right? So, so that was kind of
Good
my
luck.
introduction into the tech startup scene.
Well, and Austin's cool. It was probably even cooler back then because it wasn't as transient. Maybe, I mean, it's gotten a little bit crazy just in terms of how built out it is and the lack of infrastructure to support it. So you try the music scene. Now you've got a very diverse background at this point, and now you've seen a little bit of tech. What year are we talking about here, and what'd you do after Dig the Gig?
I have no idea what year. Maybe 2012, 13, 14, around there. So Dig the Gig failed. Started working for an advertising agency that was based in Houston that was setting
Hmm.
up shop in Austin.
Okay.
And every once in a while, I would drive in from Austin to Houston to work and spend some time with a lot of the developers and then the team that they had here in Houston. And the gentleman who owned the advertising agency used to run the Shell Tech Venture Fund a long
Oh.
time ago.
Hmm.
And one time I was in Houston, he's like, hey, take a look at these oil and gas trade shows. They could probably use some help navigating this digital quote unquote transformation, right?
Sure.
And so I looked at one of the trade shows that had like 1,000 booths and did an assessment on every single one of those 1,000 in terms of what I thought their digital presence was, whether that be internal or external, and
Yeah.
scored them. And it was like 95% were a D.
Right.
And I go, holy shit, this is a huge opportunity. Move to Houston.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I made it here.
And it also exposed you to oil and gas,
Yes.
which you
Which
didn't have any pre.
I absolutely love oil and gas, and I'm disappointed that I didn't know about it growing up. Just
I,
because there's so much you can do, it's global. You'll never stop learning. It runs the entire everything that we do. I mean, it runs whether that's getting water out of your sink is coming from the industries that we're in to driving your car, right?
yeah. I mean, look, this microphone and our phones and this computer and that light ring. I mean, all of it, right? And of course, the electricity to power it. I think that is in part because of where you and I grew up, right? If you're in the Northeast or like way in the Southeast, you don't see wells, right? You don't see pump
Yeah,
jacks, so it's just not right there in front of you, and you just start to think of it as something that goes on elsewhere, and then product is brought to you. But then when you start to dive into it a little bit more, I had the same realization in 2008, 9, 10. I'm like, man, there's like such amazing innovation and technology happening like miles below the ground. Yet I'm seeing real gaps in terms of like communication from the field to the back office, and even just within the tech that's being used in the back office. You have companies running complex accounting scenarios and reporting out of QuickBooks, but meanwhile, in
right.
the field, you've got some of the most advanced tech in the world outside of sending people to outer space. So I'm like, all right, this is going to have to catch up. And it has. I think there's been like substantial improvement in the tech that's used. I had a great conversation earlier with a 2000 well company, and they're a little bit newer. They bought some assets recently. Just seeing the way that a new company attacks bringing on tech, like it's leaning toward cloud. It's immediately thinking about data first, optimizing production, and being very methodical with how they are open about information and breaking down some of the silos that previously existed. So I think with the younger generations that come in, um, we'll start to continue to see some sort of shifts in terms of the types of technology and even just how companies operate, not in silos. So to get back to you, I really like your story. So now all of a sudden you're exposed to Houston, you're exposed to oil and gas, and you're an entrepreneur at this point. You've had some wins, you've had some losses. What happened? You decided like, all right, I see opportunity here. You graded a bunch of companies, and their digital presence was terrible. Where'd you go from there?
So I actually met a group of guys uh, that invested in a company that was trying to be the Amazon for oil and gas. And this is probably 2017, 2018. And the company during that time, the oil market wasn't so hot and the company was struggling. And so the CEO of that company decided to kind of go in a different direction. And the investors were like, Marty, we think something's here, see what you think and see if we can kind of move forward with what we've got.
Mm,
And so I started really diving into what is happening with equipment sales and sourcing and
mm.
who's doing what and why do they do it, where's the information flowing, how is it flowing, and did a whole bunch of research on the various attempts that people have made trying to build the Amazon for oil and gas. And then the more research I did, the more it centered into how do we focus in one area and then expand out, right?
Yeah.
And I don't know anything on oil and gas at that time. So I'm like, okay, what do I know about oil and gas? If upstream market is good, downstream market is bad, right? Kind
Sure.
of basic understanding of that. And I was like, okay, if I was to start a business in this sales and sourcing kind of realm, how do you do that? Well, you want to protect yourself, right? So if one market's hot, one market's not, and
Yep.
you're in one or the other, how can I get into all three segments of the market, right?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Pipes, valves, fittings, and flanges are in every single one of those segments, and you can move beyond PVF into ancillary products really easily. So
Yep.
then, just spend a ton of time kind of trying to figure this out. Years,
And now it leads you to starting Industrial
yes.
Data Labs. It only took 42 minutes for us to give the first plug to your rapidly growing company that, by the way, presented in Oklahoma City. And apparently somebody saw the presentation and gave you a wheelbarrow full of money because they saw the opportunity. I think it's super cool what you guys are doing. So why don't you tell the masses what the hell is Industrial Data Labs, man? What are you guys doing?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the problem that we're solving is the inefficiencies in sales and sourcing in industrial markets. And so what we've noticed, there's information traveling around in spreadsheets, PDFs, and emails. And kind of the essence of the problem that we're solving is each company is requesting a piece of equipment in one of those applications with their own language. And
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of manual data entry to understand that unique language or an equipment description, translate it, and put that a price and a delivery point on it. And we're building a global data model that can understand any description, translate that into another company's kind of description, and then extend the capability to search ERPs to identify the optimal product choices based off of any company's description.
And it leverages AI to do that.
Yeah, so we fine tuned. We fine tuned an open source model with a lot of data that we receive from our partners. And the essence of the primary model that we built is that it one recognizes if something's a description or not, and then two, if it understands that it's a description, it can understand the attributes within the description. And once you have that, now you can build software around it to do work, which is
Yeah.
search an ERP, organize a spreadsheet, and you can start chipping away at a lot of the efficiencies in the system just with this base model that we built.
So the biggest benefit and why companies are doing business with you is you're saving them massive amounts of time, right? So what was previously a manual process is now something that can be done leveraging a bot, right? I mean, in short, is that accurate?
So my argument, so yeah, we're saving time, but we're making people money, right? So if a lot of the money being made is dependent upon a time to respond to an RFQ, if you can shorten up that time and make the options better, not only are you going to win in terms of speed, but you'll win in terms of margin, right? And
Yeah,
so I think that's where our value lies. The other thing that we found is interesting is the data traveling from a Shell or an Exxon to a distributor. So if you can imagine those large spreadsheets, the
sure.
data being captured for those spreadsheets a lot of times is zero. And then let's say if you're a distributor and I send you this large 1,000 line item RFQ, well, 50% of the time you're not going to be able to quote what I just provided you from your stock, right? So you have to send out 50% of those line items to your suppliers. They
Yeah.
need to price it, they need to deliver it and send it back. Do you know how much data is captured from the suppliers sending you information back?
No.
Zero. So now with
Yeah.
our model, we can capture all the data down to the attribute level, and now people can start making decisions they could never make before, which I think is really interesting about what we're doing.
Yeah. So you've raised money, right? You're
Yeah,
continuing to grow. You're seeing sales happen. You're getting booths at conferences and like kind of really know who your target market is. Um, what's next for you guys? Like say you go and you raise more money. Like how do you deploy that capital? Is it to continue to improve the AI model? Is it branching out into different industries? Is it perfecting the industry market that you're in? Is it adding sales? Like what's next for industrial data labs? Because you got a good idea, right? And you're
yeah.
executing on the idea, but it's just the beginning of this whole AI concept. Like what's next for you?
So if you look at our company, there's really three elements to what we're doing. So we're building kind of a base model that understands descriptions down to the attribute level. Then we've got a search model that can take that description, search an ERP, and come back with results, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we've got a software application layer that, well, now people have results. Now they need to do something with that results,
Take
those
action. Yeah.
results, and see them. So for us, it's going to be really expanding the core model that we have, not only making it better, but advancing it into bolts, gaskets, pumps, everything else. And then our question is like, how do we scale the search function of this technology so that more people can use it however they want, right?
Yeah.
And then the other is building software capabilities based off of what these companies want to achieve.
And who's like, without naming names if you don't want to, but like, who are your competitors for this? There's got to be somebody else doing this.
So our competitors are the existing kind of way things are done,
The
right?
status quo.
So,
Yeah.
yep, status quo, which is works today for the most part. CRMs. So, if you have a budget and it's like, well, I want to go with Salesforce, so I'm going to still have manual data entry into Salesforce. The problem is Salesforce lacks any intelligence in the PVF industry. So you're just
Or
moving
yeah.
data from one application to the other.
Yep.
In ERP, possibly is a competitor, and then custom solutions. But right now, no one's offering kind of the capabilities and intelligence we offer for the industry that we're in.
Yeah. I mean, to me, if I were to predict the future for you and your company, I would think that some of these CRMs and ERPs would start knocking and saying, wait a second, we're actually thinking about building something like this, but you've already done it. Like, can we either
Right.
buy you or partner with you or something? Because this is good. And then it puts you in kind of a unique situation where you already know how to feed the data into their systems, right? You know how to
Right.
pull data from their systems and make sense of it. And you've got a software platform. Logically, I could see whether it's even on the big side in SAP or Salesforce or some of like the more niche players who I don't even know who they are that play in the industrial space that have more of that CRM or ERP capability, which is cool. Like I think that I love gap fillers, and this is a logical gap filler that applies intelligence that people like to see. So, is there like a target size company that you go after, or do you view this as like anybody who is responding to RFQs and has like a massive number of SKUs to enter and respond to those RFQs with, like small, big, or is it really anybody that does that?
So our core focus right now is pipe, valve, fitting, and flange distributors, and we'll work with some manufacturers,
Yeah.
not all manufacturers, but our core is PVF distributors. If you do anything outside of that, we're not there yet. So we
Yep.
have a laundry list of other industries that are looking for this technology, but we can't go fast enough right now where we're at. So
Yeah, you got to master the domain that you're in right now. So, like, how do you get business? Is this something where, like, are you going out and like proactively cold calling people, or are people finding you like over the web? Like, I'm curious about. It's very niche, which is good, but
right.
how do people find you?
Well, of course, with your help, right?
That's not what I'm
So
getting at.
you and Ralph helping us out. But like in Houston, there's a really good PVF community called the PVF Roundtable. So it's a
Okay,
charitable organization whose sole purpose is to raise money and then educate some of the younger kind of Houston members or people that want to get in the industry, really learn about the industry and stay in the industry. And so we've been really fortunate to really get ingrained in that community.
sure.
And then it's just being a part of all the things that are happening in Houston. There's a huge community within the pipe, valve, fitting, and flange world globally. It is amazing. You would never know. I'm going to
I
Italy in May for a valve conference, and it'll be huge. But you would never know.
You're going to Italy in May to drink wine and eat pizza and happen to attend a pipe valve fitting flames conference, Marty. Let's not BS too much here. But that's really cool. And I didn't know that. And it makes a ton of sense. Um, I think it's super cool. So we'll wrap up here, but I'm kind of curious, like, where do people find you? Where do they find your website? Social media, things like that. If they want to get a hold of you and say, hey, I want to see what you got going on.
Yeah, website is industrialdatalabs.com. I'm on Twitter. I don't really post much on Twitter, but I read a lot on Twitter. And then
Same.
LinkedIn. Um, yeah, Twitter is amazing, especially when you get down into the little niches, especially in
Yeah.
this AI ML world. Oh my God. These people are putting together some scary things that are rather amazing that no one knows about, but will soon. So
The
Twitter, I love Twitter.
Yeah. Time suck
And then
though.
LinkedIn. Yeah. Yeah. I
Like,
was telling somebody the other day, I don't know if I already mentioned this. So I'll kind of treat Twitter like, remember our dads used to read the newspapers at night or in the morning for breakfast, right? You pull out the
I mean,
newspaper and read it.
I did too. The sports section.
Yeah. So I use Twitter in that way, right? So at night I'll flip through and
Yeah.
read a lot of the happenings on AI in the morning, right? And so I'll read what these guys are doing, and I'm like, holy shit, I am so far behind. What these people are doing are amazing, right? Then I'll hop in my car and I'll go visit a customer, and I was like, well, how many people have adopted any form of AI, whether it be Claude or ChatGPT? And they're like, nobody. And I'm like,
Yeah.
it's just such a large gap between, when you're on Twitter, it's like everybody's doing it, and you get out into the real world, it's like no one is using it at all. So, except for our stuff, right? So it's amazing, kind of the gap there, of what you think is true versus what is really true.
I think it's going to require some of the bigger companies to really implement it as part of what they do. And so for my company, for Funk Futures, like, we use the Google G Suite, and they just recently added this Gemini thing, and it
Yeah,
didn't really add much value for me. personally, like at least for what I do. But I go to Chat GPT for like two real purposes. One of them is amazing for me because I used to spend hours writing press releases announcing a new client or some sort of happening within our business. And it would be like, I've never written press releases before. So I'm like Googling how to write press releases. And then I'm,
Yeah.
starting to analyze it. It was like writing a paper in college where you've got like, this is the body and this is how you do it. And this, oh yeah, enter contact information here. I go into Chat GPT and I tell them to write a press release, and I get like two or three different versions with different tonality that I can then share with my new clients within 15 minutes. It's like a
Yeah.
massive value add for me. And then I go into MailChimp and I send it out or I post it on LinkedIn. It's amazing. So that saved me a ton of time. And second is just like, um, this information isn't always accurate. So like people still need their subscriptions to Enverus and IHS and World Database and stuff. But it's like, tell me the top 25 producing operators in the Permian Basin and how many wells they've drilled this year. Like that's pretty powerful stuff, man. Because previously you
Yeah.
had to go in and do a Google search and go one by one. And recently heard about another really cool concept that I'm going to start using more, which is like a 10K translator. So you want to work with a public company, right? And you want to find out information about them quickly. ChatGPT has an extension. You can go in and type in the company in 10K and it breaks down like all of the key metrics and information you want to have, which is like as a sales guy, when I'm selling to a public company, I want to like pull out quotes and things that they've said and talk about their specific plans. Now I don't even have to read that. I just go to ChatGPT with this plugin and it gives me answers.
Yeah.
So like there are still use cases for people to like dip their toes in without going all the way, you know?
But I think what is going to be interesting, and if people figure this out, they can provide a ton of value to a lot of these companies. Is everyone's captured by this generative AI, right? I put
Yeah.
something in, something comes back to me, generated in a text, a video, an image, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Okay, that could be used for marketing, sales pitches, maybe some video creation, examples, tutorials, e-learning, possibly things like that.
Yep.
Where the real value is that people aren't focused on but should be is taking data from one application, PDF, and understanding what's in that data and moving it to another application.
Yes.
That little gap is there's a ton of time spent there on invoices. That's how there's a lot of pipe that gets ordered incorrectly is for that reason.
Yep.
So in these little small use cases that in these operations, there's so much value. And once people start figuring that out, tons of efficiencies will be gained. And for startups, there'll be a lot of money as well.
Yeah,
So
yeah. That's really well stated, and it's not something I'm doing enough of right now. But I'm thinking like pulling data out of a PDF or an Excel spreadsheet and telling it what I want it to look like in a PowerPoint presentation. That could save me 10 hours a month, like, and that's worth a lot to me.
yeah, the one thing that we're doing, and I know we got to run. So with these quotes come these 1,000-page PDFs, right? And they
Wow.
describe the equipment. And there's like a valve tag on the PDF and these specifications on the PDF as well, right? And so there's an enormous amount of time copying and pasting that data from a PDF to a spreadsheet.
Sure.
Well, if you upload it to ChatGPT, it's not able to do that, right? Just because you're communicating with a language model who's trying to predict, in essence, your next word or what the next word should be. But these models can now identify, if you do it properly, what text needs to be extracted in order to place it in that next part in that application layer or a translation layer to now start searching ERPs. And I think there's that value that a lot of startups can help a lot of these industrial equipment manufacturers and distributors with. It'll be
Yeah,
huge.
I think that you need to go on a bit of a speaking circuit about this because I think that this is a complex concept that people don't fully understand, and I think you do a nice job of putting it in practical, simplified terms. So I appreciate that, Marty. This was a ton of fun. I didn't know if we were going to
Yes.
go for 35 minutes or for an hour. I bet we could go for another hour, but definitely check out industrialdatalabs.com. These guys are doing super cool stuff. The demo takes 5 minutes and you can see exactly what they're doing. So keep crushing it out there, Marty, and building that AI community in Houston.
We'll get there. Thank you for your time, man. I appreciate it.